The clock on the railway station wall showed 6:45 p.m. David checked his watch one more time and quickened his pace. The evening train to his hometown was scheduled to leave in 15 minutes, and he couldn't afford to miss it. His wife was expecting him for dinner, and more importantly, he had promised his daughter he would help her with her science project tonight. The business meeting had gone better than expected. After months of preparation, he had finally secured the contract that would expand his small construction company into 3 new cities. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from his business partner, but David barely glanced at them. All he wanted was to get home and celebrate with his family. The main platform buzzed with its usual evening chaos. Office workers rushed past him, clutching their phones and coffee cups. A group of college students sat on their backpacks, laughing loudly about something on their phones. Street vendors called out their wares: hot tea, samosas, newspapers, and phone chargers. The familiar smell of fried food mixed with diesel fumes filled the air. David weaved through the crowd, his leather briefcase bumping against his leg with each hurried step. He had walked this same route hundreds of times over the past 5 years, ever since he started taking contracts in the neighboring city. The routine was always the same: catch the 7 p.m. train, reach home by 8:30, kiss his wife hello, help his daughter with homework, and fall asleep watching the news. But today was different. Today, everything was about to change. As he approached platform number 3, David felt a gentle tug on his coat sleeve. He assumed it was the fabric catching on something and continued walking. The tug came again, more insistent this time. Annoyed, he looked down to free whatever was pulling at his expensive wool coat. Instead of a branch or a loose wire, he saw a small, dirty hand gripping the fabric. His eyes traveled up to see a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, looking up at him with the biggest, most desperate eyes he had ever seen. The child was tiny, much smaller than David's own daughter, who was the same age. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame: a faded blue shirt that was too big and pants that were rolled up several times at the bottom. His hair was messy and looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks, but it was his face that made David's heart skip a beat. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. "Uncle, please," the boy whispered, his voice so soft that David had to lean down to hear him over the noise of the station. "I'm so starving." The words hit David like a physical blow, not because of what the child said, but because of how he said it. The way the boy pronounced certain words, the slight accent, the familiar tilt of his head. It all reminded David of someone he hadn't seen in 2 long years. David's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the ground with a loud thud. His mouth went dry. He stared at the boy's face, taking in every detail. The shape of his nose, the way his ears stuck out just slightly, the small dimple in his chin that appeared when he was nervous. This wasn't just any hungry child begging for help. This was family, Tommy. David's voice came out as barely a whisper. The boy's eyes widened in surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or recognition. He nodded slowly, as if he wasn't sure whether David remembering his name was a good thing or not. David's mind raced back to the last time he had seen his nephew. It was at his mother's funeral 2 years ago. Tommy had been dressed in a small black suit, holding his mother's hand, trying not to cry as they lowered his grandmother into the ground. He had been chubby then, with rosy cheeks and a bright smile that could light up any room. This thin, hollow-cheeked child bearing the same name seemed like a ghost of that happy boy. "What are you doing here?" David asked, still kneeling on the dirty platform floor. Around them, people continued to rush past, completely unaware of the reunion taking place in their midst. Tommy looked around nervously, as if he was afraid someone might be watching. "Mama told me to wait here," he said quietly. "She said she would come back for me, but that was yesterday morning." Yesterday morning. David felt sick to his stomach. This child had been alone at the railway station for over 24 hours. "Where is your mama now?" David asked, trying to keep his voice calm even though panic was rising in his chest. Tommy shrugged, a gesture that looked far too mature for someone his age. "She goes away sometimes. She said the station is safe, and that kind people come here who might help me." The announcement for David's train echoed through the station. Train number 12049 to Dehradun is now boarding on platform number 3. Please have your tickets ready. David looked at the train, then back at Tommy. His comfortable evening at home, his daughter's science project, his wife's dinner, none of that mattered anymore. His nephew, his own blood, was standing in front of him, hungry and alone. "When did you last eat?" David asked gently. Tommy thought for a moment, counting on his small fingers. "A man gave me half a sandwich this morning. Before that," he trailed off, unable to remember. David's heart broke a little more. He thought about his own daughter, probably sitting at the dining table right now, complaining about the vegetables on her plate, having no idea how lucky she was to have a full meal every single day. "Are you really my uncle?" Tommy asked suddenly. "Mama showed me pictures, but that was a long time ago. You look different now." David realized he probably did look different. 2 years of business success had meant better clothes, a more expensive haircut, and probably a few more pounds around his middle. But more than that, he felt different. The carefree man who used to play with Tommy at family gatherings seemed like a stranger now. "Yes, I'm your uncle," David said, reaching out to gently touch Tommy's shoulder. The boy didn't pull away, which David took as a good sign. "I'm your mama's brother. The one who builds houses?" David nodded, surprised that Tommy remembered. "That's right. I build houses." Tommy's face brightened just a little. "Mama said you build the strongest houses in the whole world. She said if we lived in one of your houses, we would never be cold or scared." The innocent words cut deeper than any criticism could have. David had been building houses for other families, creating safe, warm homes for strangers, while his own sister and nephew had been living without shelter. The final boarding announcement for his train played over the loudspeakers. David watched as the last few passengers hurried onto the train. In a few minutes, it would leave without him. He pulled out his phone and quickly called his wife. "Priya, I'm going to be late tonight," he said when she answered. "How late?" "Mira has been waiting for you to help with her project." David looked down at Tommy, who was watching him with curious eyes. "I don't know yet. Something important has come up." "Something family-related?" There was a pause on the other end. "Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure yet," David admitted. "But I need to handle this. Can you help Mira with her project tonight? I'll make it up to her this weekend." "Of course," Priya said, concern evident in her voice. "Just be careful and call me when you can." David ended the call and put his phone back in his pocket. Tommy was still standing there, patient and quiet, as if he was used to waiting for adults to make decisions about his life. "Are you hungry right now?" David asked. Tommy nodded eagerly. "Very hungry, Uncle?" "Well then," David said, picking up his briefcase and extending his hand to his nephew. "Let's go get you something to eat. And then you can tell me everything about where your mama is and how we can find her." Tommy slipped his small, cold hand into David's warm one. As they walked away from the platform together, David realized that this was the most important business he had ever conducted. The contract he had signed earlier that day suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the small hand trusting him to make everything okay. The train pulled away from the station without him. But David didn't look back. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be. David led Tommy to a small food stall just outside the railway station. The elderly vendor, a kind-looking man with a gray beard, smiled warmly at them as they approached. The smell of freshly made parathas and hot tea filled the air, making Tommy's stomach growl loudly. "What would you like to eat?" David asked his nephew. But Tommy just stared at the food with wide eyes as if he couldn't believe this was really happening. "Anything, Uncle," Tommy whispered. "I'm not picky." David's heart ached at how grateful his nephew sounded for something as basic as a meal. He ordered 2 plates of food and 2 cups of tea, then guided Tommy to a small plastic table nearby. As they sat down, David noticed how Tommy kept looking around nervously, as if someone might take the food away from him. When the plates arrived, Tommy's eyes grew even bigger. The vendor had given them extra portions, thick parathas with butter, spiced potatoes, and a small bowl of yogurt. Tommy looked at David as if asking for permission, before slowly picking up a piece of paratha with his small hands. David watched in silence as his nephew ate with the desperate hunger of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Tommy tried to eat slowly at first, probably trying to show good manners, but his hunger took over. He finished the first paratha in minutes, then looked longingly at the second one. "Eat as much as you want," David said gently. "There's no hurry." As Tommy continued eating, David studied his nephew's appearance more carefully. The boy's clothes were not just dirty, they were worn out and had small holes in several places. His shoes were too big for his feet and held together with tape, but what worried David most was how thin Tommy had become. His wrists looked fragile and his cheeks were hollow where they used to be round and full. "Tommy," David said carefully, "can you tell me about your mama? Where is she staying these days?" Tommy paused between bites, his expression becoming cautious. "She doesn't like to talk about where we stay," he said quietly. "She says it's temporary, and we'll have a real home again soon." "But where did you sleep last night?" Tommy's voice became even smaller. "At the station. There's a corner near the waiting room where the security guard is nice. He doesn't tell us to leave." David felt anger rising in his chest, but not at Tommy. At himself, at the situation, at his sister for letting things get this bad. "How long have you been staying at the station?" "Maybe a week? I don't remember exactly." Tommy took another bite of food. "Before that, we stayed with Mama's friend for a few days. But her landlord said we had to leave." "And before that?" Tommy shrugged. "Different places. Sometimes there are buildings where nobody lives and we can sleep there. Sometimes we stay in the park, but only when it's not raining." Each answer made David feel worse. His nephew was describing a life of complete instability, moving from one unsafe place to another, never knowing where he would sleep or when he would eat next. "What does your mama do during the day?" David asked. Tommy's face changed, becoming sad and worried. "She goes to look for work. She says she's trying to find a job so we can get our own place again. But sometimes—" He stopped talking and focused on his food. "Sometimes what?" "Sometimes she comes back very sad. And she smells different. And she sleeps for a long time." Tommy's voice was barely audible. "When she's like that, I have to take care of myself." David's hands clenched into fists under the table. He was beginning to understand what had happened to his sister, and it was worse than he had imagined. The different smell Tommy mentioned, the long periods of sleep, the erratic behavior, it all pointed to substance abuse. "How often does Mama go away and leave you alone?" Tommy counted on his fingers again. "This time is 3 days. Last week she was gone for 2 days. The week before that she came back every night, 3 days. A 7-year-old child had been fending for himself at a railway station for 3 days. Aren't you scared when she's gone?" Tommy nodded honestly. "Very scared. Especially at night. But I know she always comes back. She promised she would never leave me forever." The innocent faith in Tommy's voice broke David's heart. This child still believed in his mother, still trusted that she would return despite being abandoned repeatedly. "Do you remember our old house?" David asked, trying to shift to happier memories. "When you used to visit with Mama and Grandma?" Tommy's face lit up for the first time since David had found him. "Yes, Grandma made the best sweets and you taught me how to use a hammer. And Mama used to laugh all the time back then." "She did laugh a lot," David agreed, remembering his sister as she used to be. Rita had always been the funny one in the family, quick to joke and make everyone smile. She had been a good mother to Tommy in those early years, working hard to provide for him after his father left. "What happened to change everything?" David asked gently. Tommy's expression became confused and sad. "I don't know exactly. After Grandma died, Mama started crying a lot. She said we didn't have any family left who cared about us. She said everyone was too busy with their own lives to help us." David winced. He remembered the fight he and Rita had after their mother's funeral. Rita had asked him for money to help with medical bills, and he had refused, thinking she was being irresponsible with her finances. He had been building his business and dealing with his own stress, and he had been harsh with his words. "I told Mama you didn't want to see us anymore," Tommy continued innocently. "She cried when I said that." "Tommy, that's not true," David said urgently. "I do want to see you. I've always wanted to see you. But Mama said you told her we were not your problem." The words hit David like a slap. He had said something like that during their last argument, but he had been angry and didn't mean it the way it sounded. He had told Rita that he couldn't keep giving her money every time she had a crisis, that she needed to be more responsible. But Rita had taken it as complete rejection. "I made a mistake," David admitted. "I said things I didn't mean when I was upset. But I never stopped caring about you and your mama." Tommy studied his uncle's face carefully as if trying to decide whether to believe him. "Really? Really? I think about you all the time. I just didn't know how to find you. Mama has your phone number. She showed it to me once. But she said you were too important now to talk to people like us." David pulled out his phone and checked his call history. He realized that Rita might have tried to call him, but he often ignored unknown numbers, thinking they were business calls or spam. How many times had his sister tried to reach out for help while he was ignoring her calls? "Tell me about the friend you stayed with," David said. "Do you remember her name?" "Auntie Neha. She was nice, but she was scared of her landlord. He shouted a lot and said we were bringing trouble to his building." David made a mental note of the name. If he could find this Neha, she might know more about where Rita was now. "Do you know any other places your mama likes to go?" Tommy thought hard. "There's a place where she meets other people sometimes, near the big temple. She says they understand her problems there." David nodded grimly. It sounded like Rita had found a community of people with similar struggles, possibly other people dealing with addiction or homelessness. As Tommy finished his second paratha, David noticed the boy's eyelids were getting heavy. The combination of a full stomach and feeling safe was making him sleepy. "Tommy, I want you to know something very important," David said, reaching across the table to take his nephew's hand. "You're not alone anymore. I'm going to help you and your mama, okay?" Tommy nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "Promise?" "I promise. But first we need to find your mama. Do you think you could show me some of the places where she might be?" Tommy straightened up, suddenly looking more alert. "Yes, I know all the places. I can take you there." David paid the vendor, who refused to take full payment when he realized the situation. "Take care of the little one," the old man said kindly. "Children should never have to worry about food." As they walked away from the food stall, Tommy slipped his hand into David's again. "Uncle, are you going to take me away from Mama?" The question revealed Tommy's deepest fear, that getting help meant being separated from the only parent he had ever known, despite all their struggles. "No," David said firmly. "I want to help both of you stay together. But your mama needs help to get better, and you need a safe place to stay while she gets that help." Tommy nodded solemnly, as if he understood more about his mother's condition than any child should have to understand. Together, they began walking toward the Temple District, beginning the search for Rita and hoping they would find her before it was too late. The Temple District was a 20-minute walk from the railway station, and David could feel Tommy's small hand tightening in his as they got closer. The evening crowd was thick here, devotees coming for the evening prayers, vendors selling flowers and sweets, and groups of people sitting on the temple steps talking quietly among themselves. There, Tommy pointed to a small park across from the main temple. "Mama sometimes sits there with her friends." David looked where his nephew was pointing and saw a group of people gathered under a large tree. Some were sitting on pieces of cardboard, others on old blankets. Even from a distance, David could tell these were people who had nowhere else to go. Their clothes were worn, their belongings packed in plastic bags and old suitcases. "Are you sure this is where she comes?" David asked. Tommy nodded. "They share food sometimes, and they talk about their problems. Mama says they're the only people who understand what it's like." As they walked closer, David felt nervous. He was wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He probably looked like a government official or someone from social services who might cause trouble for this community. An older woman noticed them approaching first. She was sitting on a worn blanket, sorting through a bag of clothes. When she saw Tommy, her face brightened with recognition. "Tommy! Where have you been, child? Your mama has been worried sick about you." David felt a wave of relief. Rita was alive, and she had been looking for Tommy. "Auntie Kamala," Tommy said shyly. "This is my uncle. He found me at the railway station." The woman looked David up and down suspiciously. "Uncle? Rita never mentioned having family." I'm her brother, David explained. We lost touch for a while. I'm trying to find her. Kamala's expression softened slightly, but she remained cautious. She's not here right now. She went to look for Tommy at all his usual places. She's been searching since this morning. Do you know where she might have gone? Could be anywhere. The old market, the bus stand, maybe back to the railway station. She was really upset when she couldn't find him yesterday. Another man from the group approached them. He was younger, maybe in his 30s, with kind eyes but a tired face. You're really Rita's brother? He asked David. Yes, I am. She talks about you sometimes, says you're successful, that you build houses. David nodded, feeling guilty about the pride he usually felt when people mentioned his success. Right now, his achievements felt meaningless. She's proud of you, you know, the man continued. But she's also scared of you. Scared of me? Why? She thinks you'll judge her, thinks she's a failure. She says you have a perfect life and wouldn't understand her problems. Tommy tugged on David's coat. That's Uncle Rajesh. He helps Mama sometimes. Rajesh knelt down to Tommy's level. Are you okay, little one? You had us all worried. I'm okay. Uncle David gave me food, and now we're looking for Mama together. Rajesh looked surprised. You fed him? Of course, David said. He's my nephew. Rita said her family didn't care about them anymore. David felt another stab of guilt. There was a misunderstanding. I want to help them both. Kamala stood up from her blanket and studied David's face more carefully. You look like Rita, actually. Same eyes. She seemed to make a decision. She usually comes back here before dark. You can wait if you want. David looked around at the small community of people. They had so little, but they were sharing what they had with each other. Someone was brewing tea on a small gas burner, and the smell reminded him of his childhood home. Can I ask you something? David said to Kamala. How long has Rita been like this? Kamala glanced at Tommy, who was now playing with a stray cat that had wandered into the park. She lowered her voice. About 1.5 years. She came here after losing her job. Then she lost her apartment. Things got worse after that. What kind of job did she have? She worked in a small office doing data entry. But she started missing days when her problems got bad. Eventually, they had to let her go. Rajesh joined the conversation. She's a good person, your sister. She always makes sure Tommy eats even when she doesn't. But she's fighting some tough battles. David understood what he meant. Has she tried to get help? A few times. But the free programs have long waiting lists, and the private ones cost too much money. She gets frustrated and gives up. As they talked, more people in the group began to relax around David. An elderly man offered him tea, and a young woman showed him pictures of her own children on her phone. David realized these weren't dangerous people. They were just families who had fallen on hard times, creating their own support system in a world that often ignored them. Uncle! Tommy came running back, the cat following behind him. Auntie Kamala says Mama might be at the shelter near the hospital. She goes there sometimes to use the bathroom and get water. David's phone buzzed with a call from his wife. He answered quickly. David, it's getting late. Mira keeps asking when you're coming home. I'm still dealing with the family situation, he said, walking a few steps away so Tommy couldn't hear. It's more serious than I thought. Do you need me to come help? David looked back at Tommy, who was now sitting with Kamala and sharing stories about the cat. Not yet. But I might not be home tonight. It's my nephew Priya, Rita's son. They're homeless. There was a long pause. Oh my God, is he okay? He is now. But I need to find Rita and figure out how to help them both. Of course. Do whatever you need to do. I'll handle things here. David felt grateful for his wife's understanding. I'll call you later with an update. He hung up and rejoined the group. Kamala was braiding Tommy's hair while he sat patiently, clearly enjoying the attention. The shelter is only 10 minutes from here, Rajesh said. I can take you there if you want. That would be helpful, thank you. As they prepared to leave, Kamala took David aside. Your sister is struggling, but she loves that boy more than anything in the world. Whatever help you give them, make sure you don't separate them. He's the only thing keeping her going. David nodded. I understand. They walked through the narrow streets toward the shelter, Tommy chattering excitedly about seeing his mother soon. David tried to prepare himself for what Rita might look like now, how she might react to seeing him after 2 years of silence. The shelter was a simple concrete building with a small sign by the door. Inside, David could see people sitting on benches, some eating simple meals, others just resting. A volunteer at the front desk looked up as they entered. "We're looking for someone," Rajesh explained. "A woman named Rita. She has a son this boy's age." The volunteer nodded. "I think I know who you mean. She was here earlier asking about her missing son." "She seemed very upset. Is she still here?" "No, she left about an hour ago. Said she was going to check the railway station again." Tommy's face fell. They had just missed her. David made a quick decision. "We'll go back to the station then. If we keep missing each other, we'll never find her." As they walked back through the busy streets, David's mind was racing with plans. Once he found Rita, he would need to convince her to accept help without making her feel ashamed. He would need to find temporary housing for them both, get Rita into a treatment program, and make sure Tommy continued going to school. But first, he just needed to find his sister and convince her that family meant never giving up on each other, no matter how far apart they had drifted. When they reached the railway station, it was nearly 9 p.m. The evening rush was over and the platforms were quieter. Tommy led them to the corner where he had been sleeping, near the waiting room. "There!" Tommy suddenly broke free from David's hand and ran toward a woman sitting alone on a bench. David's heart stopped. Even from behind, even after 2 years, even though she was much thinner than he remembered, he recognized his sister immediately. Rita was hunched over, her head in her hands, clearly crying. "Mama!" Tommy called out as he ran to her. Rita looked up, and when she saw her son running toward her, the relief on her face was overwhelming. She swept Tommy into her arms, holding him tight and crying harder. "I thought I lost you," she whispered into his hair. "I thought something terrible had happened. I'm okay, Mama. And look who found me." Rita looked up over Tommy's head and saw David standing a few feet away. The shock on her face was complete. Surprise, fear, shame, and hope all mixed together. "Hello, Rita," David said softly. For a long moment, sister and brother just stared at each other across the space of 2 years and 1,000 misunderstandings, while Tommy held them both together with his small but powerful love. For what felt like an hour but was probably only 30 seconds, Rita and David stared at each other without speaking. Tommy looked back and forth between them, sensing the tension but not understanding why his mama and uncle weren't talking. Rita was the first to break the silence. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, and David could hear years of pain and exhaustion in those simple words. "I found Tommy at the station," David replied carefully. "He was asking people for food." Rita's face crumpled with shame. She pulled Tommy closer to her, as if trying to shield him from David's judgment. "I only left him for a few hours. I was looking for work, and then I got delayed." David could smell alcohol on her breath, even from several feet away. Her clothes were dirty and wrinkled, and her hair looked like she had been sleeping rough. But underneath all of that, she was still his little sister, the girl who used to follow him around asking a million questions when they were children. "Rita, we need to talk," David said gently. "About what?" Her voice became defensive. "About how I'm a terrible mother? About how I've ruined my life? I already know all of that." Tommy looked confused and scared by his mother's tone. "Mama, Uncle David helped me. He bought me food and he's been looking for you." Rita looked down at her son, then back at David. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help us? You made it clear 2 years ago that we weren't your problem." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Rita, I never meant—" "Yes, you did," she interrupted. "You told me I was irresponsible. You said I needed to figure out my own problems. You said you couldn't keep bailing me out every time I made a mistake. I was angry about something else that day. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you check on us even once?" David had no good answer for that. The truth was, he had been so focused on building his business and his own family that he had pushed thoughts of Rita and Tommy to the back of his mind. Whenever he did think about them, he told himself that Rita was probably doing fine, that she would call if she really needed help. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I should have called. I should have made sure you were okay. Rita laughed, but there was no humor in it. Well, as you can see, we're definitely not okay. Tommy was getting more upset by the tension between the adults. Please don't fight, he said in a small voice. I don't like it when people fight. Both Rita and David immediately softened their voices. Rita kissed the top of Tommy's head. We're not fighting, baby. We're just talking about grown-up things. David knelt down so he was at Tommy's eye level. Your mama is right. We're not fighting, but I want to help you both, if you'll let me. Rita stood up quickly, pulling Tommy with her. We don't need your help. We've been managing fine on our own. Rita, look around, David said, gesturing to the railway station platform. This isn't managing. This isn't safe for Tommy. You think I don't know that? Rita's voice rose, and several people nearby turned to look at them. You think I want my son sleeping on train station floors? You think I planned for any of this to happen? David could see that Rita was on the edge of breaking down completely. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing around nervously as if looking for an escape route. Tell me what happened, David said quietly. Help me understand how things got this bad. Rita was quiet for a long moment, holding Tommy close. Finally, she started talking, her voice flat and tired. After Mama died, I couldn't afford the medical bills and the funeral costs. I used up all my savings and borrowed money from friends. Then I got sick and missed too much work, so they fired me. Without a job, I couldn't pay rent. The landlord gave me 1 month to find the money, but nobody would hire me without good references from my last job. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We moved in with my friend Kavia for a while, but her husband didn't like having us there. Then we stayed with another friend, but that didn't work out either. Eventually, we ended up in a cheap hotel, but even that was too expensive. What about government assistance? David asked. Have you ever tried to get help from government offices? Rita asked bitterly. The lines are endless, the paperwork is confusing, and they treat you like you're lying about everything. They wanted proof of address, but we didn't have a permanent address. They wanted employment records, but I had been fired. Everything I applied for, I was missing some document or didn't qualify for some reason. David was starting to understand how someone could fall through the cracks of the system, especially someone who was already struggling with stress and depression. And the drinking? He asked carefully. Rita's face flushed with shame. It started as just a way to sleep at night. When you're sleeping outside, every noise wakes you up. You're always worried about Tommy's safety, always stressed about where the next meal will come from. Someone told me that a little alcohol would help me relax. But it got worse. Much worse, Rita admitted. Some days I would drink to forget how hungry we were. Other days I would drink because I felt so guilty about what I was putting Tommy through. The more I drank, the harder it became to look for work or deal with paperwork or make good decisions. Tommy had been listening quietly, and now he looked up at his mother. Mama, you don't have to be sad anymore. Uncle David is here to help us. Rita looked at David with a mixture of hope and fear. Even if you wanted to help, what could you do? I don't have any job skills anymore. I've been out of work for over a year. Who would hire someone like me? We'll figure it out, David said. But first, you need to get clean. And Tommy needs a stable place to live while you're getting better. You want to take him away from me? Rita's grip on Tommy tightened. No, David said firmly. I want to help you both. But Rita, you can't take care of Tommy when you can't take care of yourself. Look at him. He's been living on the streets, begging for food, taking care of himself when you disappear for days at a time. Rita looked down at her son and seemed to really see him for the first time. She noticed how thin he had become, how dirty his clothes were, how tired his young face looked. I'm a terrible mother, she whispered. No, you're not, Tommy said immediately. You're the best mama in the world. You always make sure I eat first. You always keep me warm at night. You tell me stories when I'm scared? Rita started crying harder. You shouldn't have to live like this, baby. You should have a real bed and clean clothes and toys to play with. David pulled out his phone and quickly called his wife. When Priya answered, he explained the situation as simply as he could. Bring them home, Priya said without hesitation. We have a guest room and Mira would love to have a cousin to play with. Are you sure? This could be complicated. Rita needs professional help. Then we'll get her professional help. But tonight they both need a safe place to sleep and a hot shower. Bring them home, David. David hung up and looked at his sister. Rita, my wife wants you and Tommy to come stay with us tonight. Tomorrow we can start figuring out a long-term plan. Rita shook her head. I can't. I don't want your family to see me like this. Priya doesn't care what you look like. She cares that you're family and that you need help. Tommy tugged on his mother's shirt. Please, Mama. I want to sleep in a real bed tonight, and I want to meet my cousin. Rita looked at her son's hopeful face, then at David's outstretched hand. After a long moment, she took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, she said quietly, but just for tonight. As they walked toward David's car, Tommy skipped ahead excitedly, chattering about everything he wanted to do at his uncle's house. Rita walked slowly beside David, still looking like she might change her mind and run away at any moment. Rita, David said as they reached the car, I know you don't trust me yet. I know I haven't earned the right to help you. But please give me a chance to be the brother I should have been 2 years ago. Rita looked at him with tears in her eyes. What if I can't get better? What if I'm too broken to fix? Then we'll figure that out together, David said. But you're not doing this alone anymore. As they drove through the city toward David's house, Tommy fell asleep in the back seat, finally relaxed enough to let his guard down. Rita stared out the window at the passing lights, probably wondering if this was real or just another dream that would disappear in the morning. But for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. 6 months later, David stood at the kitchen window of his house, watching Tommy and his daughter Mira play cricket in the backyard. The transformation in his nephew was remarkable. The hollow-cheeked, frightened child from the railway station had been replaced by a healthy, laughing boy who looked exactly his age for the first time in years. Uncle David, did you see that shot? Tommy called out, waving his plastic bat in the air. I hit it all the way to the fence. David smiled and gave him a thumbs up. It was a Saturday morning, and these had become his favorite times, peaceful family moments that he had never fully appreciated before finding Tommy at the station. The front door opened, and Rita walked in carrying a small bag of groceries. She looked different too, cleaner, healthier, and most importantly, sober. Her hair was neatly braided, and she was wearing the uniform from her new job at a local medical clinic where she worked as a receptionist. How was your shift? David asked as she set the groceries on the counter. Good, Rita said, though David could hear the tiredness in her voice. Dr. Sharma said I'm doing well with the computer system. She might let me help with some of the filing next week. It hadn't been easy getting to this point. The first few weeks after bringing Rita and Tommy home had been some of the most challenging of David's life. Rita had gone through withdrawal symptoms that kept the whole house awake at night. She had tried to leave twice, convinced that she was putting too much burden on David's family. Tommy had struggled too. After months of taking care of himself, he had trouble trusting that adults would actually take care of him. He would hide food in his room and wake up in the middle of the night to check that his mother was still there. It had taken weeks of patience and consistency for him to believe that this new stability was real. Where's Priya? Rita asked, looking around the kitchen. She took the kids to buy new school supplies. Tommy starts at Mira's school on Monday. Rita's face showed a mixture of pride and nervousness. Do you think he'll be okay? He's been so excited, but I'm worried the other kids might ask questions about where he's been. David understood her concern. Tommy's education had been interrupted for almost a year, and while he was naturally smart, he was behind in several subjects. They had spent the summer working with a tutor to help him catch up. He'll be fine, David assured her. Kids are more accepting than we think. And if anyone gives him trouble, Mira will set them straight. She's very protective of her cousin. Rita smiled at that. The friendship between Tommy and Mira had been one of the unexpected joys of this whole situation. Despite their different backgrounds, the two children had bonded quickly. Mira had shared her toys without being asked, and Tommy had taught her games he had learned from the street children. They balanced each other out perfectly. I have some news, Rita said, sitting down at the kitchen table. Dr. Sharma offered me full-time hours starting next month. It means I'll finally be making enough money to start looking for our own place. David felt a complicated mix of emotions. He was proud of Rita's progress and independence, but he had gotten used to having Tommy and Rita in the house. More than that, he was worried about whether Rita was ready to handle everything on her own. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" he asked carefully. Rita's expression became defensive for a moment, a flash of the old Rita who had been so suspicious of help. But then she took a deep breath and relaxed. "I think so," she said. "I've been sober for 5 months now. I go to my meetings every week. I have a job and some savings. Tommy is doing well in therapy," David nodded. Rita had been attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings religiously, and Tommy had been seeing a child psychologist to help him process the trauma of their homeless months. Both of them were making good progress. "But I'm scared," Rita admitted quietly. "What if I mess up again? What if the stress of being on our own makes me want to drink? What if I can't handle Tommy's needs when he has bad days?" These were valid concerns. Rita had made tremendous progress, but recovery was an ongoing process, not a destination. David had learned a lot about addiction in the past 6 months, attending family support meetings and reading everything he could find. "You don't have to do it alone," David said. "Even when you have your own place, we're still family. If you're having a hard day, you call me. If Tommy needs help with homework, he can come here. If you want to have dinner together on Sundays, our door is always open." Rita's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You don't need to thank me. You did the hard work of getting sober and rebuilding your life. I just provided a safe place for you to do it." The back door burst open and Tommy ran into the kitchen, followed by Mira. Both children were sweaty and happy from their game. "Mama!" Tommy hugged Rita around the waist. "Did you see me playing cricket? I'm getting really good." "I saw, baby." "You're amazing." Rita kissed the top of his head, and David noticed how natural these affectionate moments had become. In the early days, Tommy had been almost afraid to touch his mother, as if he didn't want to burden her with his needs. "Uncle David," Mira said, "Tommy says he might move to his own house soon. Does that mean he won't live here anymore?" David and Rita exchanged glances. They hadn't told the children about Rita's plans yet, wanting to make sure everything was definite first. "Well," David said, kneeling down to both children's level, "Tommy and Auntie Rita might get their own apartment soon, but it will be very close by and you'll still see each other all the time." Tommy's face fell. "But I like living here. This is the nicest house I've ever lived in." Rita knelt down beside her son. "Tommy, having our own place doesn't mean we're leaving the family. It just means we're ready to take care of ourselves again. And Uncle David and Auntie Priya and Mira will always be part of our lives. Promise?" Tommy asked. "I promise," Rita said firmly. Mira brightened up. "Can I help you decorate your new room, Tommy?" "Yes, and can I still come here to play sometimes?" "Every day if you want," David said. "In fact, I was thinking we could set up a study area in the garage where you and Mira could do homework together after school." Over the next few weeks, they found a small 2-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes away from David's house. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe, with a little balcony where Rita could grow plants. Tommy was excited to have his own room for the first time in his life. The day they moved in, the whole extended family came to help. Priya had organized a housewarming party, and even some of Rita's friends from her AA meetings came by with small gifts and encouragement. David watched Rita directing the placement of furniture and chatting with the neighbors, and he realized how much she had changed. The defeated, angry woman he had found at the railway station had been replaced by someone who was cautious but hopeful, someone who was learning to accept help without shame and to give help without expecting anything in return. Tommy had adapted to the new apartment quickly, but he still came to David's house every day after school. He would do his homework with Mira, eat dinner with the family, and then go home to his own bed. It was the perfect balance of independence and support. One evening, 3 months after Rita and Tommy had moved out, David received a phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he heard a woman's voice, nervous but determined. "Is this David? Rita's brother?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Sunita. I got your number from Rita. I'm in a situation similar to what your sister went through. I have a young daughter, and we've been staying at the railway station for the past week. Rita said you might be able to help us find resources." David felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it wasn't panic. It was determination. Of course. Can you tell me a little about your situation? As he listened to Sunita's story, David realized that this was how the cycle of help continued. Rita, who had once been too proud to accept assistance, was now connecting other struggling families with the support they needed. After he hung up, David called Rita to discuss how they could help Sunita and her daughter. As they talked through options and resources, David felt proud of how far his sister had come, not just in her own recovery, but in her willingness to be part of the solution for others. Later that evening, Tommy called to say goodnight as he did every day. "Uncle David," he said, "I told my teacher today about how you found me at the railway station. She said you're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Tommy. I just did what family is supposed to do." "Well, I think you're a hero anyway. And Mama says that when I grow up, I want to help other kids who are hungry and scared, just like you helped me." After they hung up, David sat on his porch looking at the stars. 6 months ago, he had been focused on expanding his business and building his wealth. He had measured success by contracts signed and profits earned. Now he understood that real success was measured in different ways. In a nephew who felt safe enough to dream about the future. In a sister who had found the strength to rebuild her life. In a family that had learned that love means never giving up on each other. No matter how far apart they drift, the railway station was still there. Still full of people rushing to catch their trains. But now David knew that sometimes the most important journeys don't require a ticket. They just require the courage to reach out when someone needs help and the wisdom to accept help when you need it yourself.